Good evening, everybody. I'm Barb Smith from the Literacy Design Collaborative. I'm the Manager of Professional Development and Partnerships, and I'm so excited that you're here with me to help launch the first in our series of webinars. We're going to be holding these bi-monthly. This was a request from members of the LDC community to begin to be able to have some sort of virtual professional development that was topical. Maybe it wasn't appealing to the same folks each month, but something where people could come together to chat, solve problems of practice, and share ideas. We're aware that sometimes we're each off in our own schools and states actually duplicating efforts. And the LDC organization is really about examples and connecting people to make the work flow easier and to really leverage our collective expertise. One of the topics we're getting a lot of asks around are topics around leadership for new principals, for new sites, and then also places where LDC has been implemented for a while, people wanting to talk a little bit about how to grow with quality, and how to sustain when you have turnover and changes in leadership or resources become more scarce. Or as new initiatives come along, you're trying to work with competing priorities. So I'm Barb Smith and just happy to be here with you tonight. We're hosting Rebecca Reumann-Moore. Many of you know Rebecca. She's been out to your school districts as Research for Action is really a boots on the ground research group that has done a lot of the work in the early Common Core implementation grants for the Gates Foundation. We're just happy to hear from her tonight. I'd love to hear who's here in the room. I think we've accomplished some of that through the chat and through people announcing themselves. But if there is anybody else who hasn't said hello and would like to, please go ahead and do that now. If you've just joined on recently. All right. I do see Michael is from Orlando. So we do have Florida represented, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, New Jersey. Those are just a few of the places that I'm seeing represented tonight. We started working through this before the meeting began, but just want to review with you with GoToMeeting. I'm not sure if you see quite the same thing I see, but you should have a chat window. You can respond to the entire audience, or you can ask questions of specific audience members by using the drop down, and you should be able to see the attendees. Please participate when we have opportunities for open-ended conversation. We really want to make this a conversation among friends. And again, I'll just thank you. We've already crossed this bridge of just muting and unmuting ourselves. The focus tonight is going to be on how we're using the results of the research to grow leaders, to apply to our own leadership work. And I do want to let you know that all of those resources are on the results section of the LDC website. There are case studies and success stories. Some of these materials are also featured in the blog. And you can help stay abreast of all of those things if you take a look towards the bottom of your screen, kind of below the fold, as we would say. In the news section, you can now subscribe to receive weekly news to LDC. Jeannie Sharkey, our marketing maven, is here on the call, and she'd be happy to talk with any of you about being in the news yourselves, because that's one of the things we really try to do is promote the successes and learning of the community. And also just to help promote any resources that you're looking for as well. We really want to hear that. Our next webinar is going to be in March. We're looking at a bi-monthly schedule. March, May, September, and then the first week after Thanksgiving, which will be the beginning of December for 2015. We're looking for these to be hosted by the community. We've had requests for discipline-specific nights, an elementary type evening, and also for more work around reading strategies in response to writing. So those are some of the few things that we've been hearing about and looking at. We are going to send out this link, but we would really like to get some feedback on this evening. Rebecca is going to post this link at the end of our session. I'm also going to tweet it out on the LDC site, but I promise it's short. It's really what was valuable, what wasn't. Give us a little feedback so that we can do better. We've all signed in for webinars that have been very powerful and others that have been ghost towns. So guess which one we're trying to have. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, and she is going to lead off by sharing a little bit of RFA's research and how that relates to leadership. Throughout the rest of the evening, we're going to periodically stop and ask from the group some of your strategies and lessons learned and tips for each other.
Okay, hi everybody, this is Rebecca. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, for taking time out of your evening to get together and hopefully talk and share ideas and perspectives. I want to give you a little overview of what we'll be talking about today. First, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background about our research, and then I'm going to mainly focus on the conditions we've identified that are important for strong implementation and strategies that can help bring about those conditions. And I'm going to talk about each condition as a chunk of time, and then we'll have a brief time for discussion and questions after each condition. So we've been conducting research on and providing feedback about LDC since it began in 2010. And so the research I'm talking about builds on multiple years of field visits and surveys across the U.S. The primary data sources are interviews with teachers, district and school administrators in states, especially Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Florida, and New York. And I'm going to, for the survey data, be focusing on our 2013 survey, which went out to over 3,000 teachers and had a response rate of 54%. And most of the focus today is going to involve 3 case studies that we did to look more deeply at what was happening in several sites. And here, this slide gives you a little information about the case study sites: Kenton County, Kentucky, and Hillsborough County, 2 school districts, and Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Lebanon, Intermediate Unit 13. These were sites which had had initial success in implementing the tools, and we went and did more in-depth field work to understand more about what approaches and supports were contributing to successful adoption and use of the tools. They're diverse in a number of ways. I mean, one obvious one being that the IU is an educational service agency that encompasses 22 districts, and the other 2 sites were individual districts. They're very different in size. Hillsborough is one of the largest districts in the U.S. with about 200,000 students. Kenton has 14,000, and all the IU districts are smaller than that. And they're diverse in a number of other ways as well. You can read the individual case studies on the LDC website at the link Barb pointed out earlier, or on our website. There'll be information about that again at the end. But today I'm going to focus on what we call the cross case study, where we pulled together key strategies looking across all of the sites. And the last introductory thing I want to show you is just the theory of action that we put together to guide our research. I want to show you how the conditions that we're talking about today fit into the whole picture. So those conditions are those big light blue circles in the center of the picture, and they're professional learning, leadership, and alignment. And when they're in place, for robust implementation to be in place, we need those conditions to then see some indicators of robust implementation, like changes in teacher beliefs and knowledge, and changes in classroom practice and student learning, which then ultimately should lead to intermediate outcomes of instructional change and increased student learning, and the hope hoped for long-term impact of students graduating school, college, and career. So these conditions and strategies related to them will be to the focus of today's presentation. I just want to remind you, if you're just joining us, that you can mute yourself if there's background noise where you are, and then unmute if you want to say something when we get to the discussion. So the first condition is leadership, and effective leadership, as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, is really important at every level, and it's central to really cultivating all of these conditions. The strategy, I'll be discussing all the strategies today to lead to the conditions in several different ways. One is common best practices, and were strategies that were shared across all three sites. Distinct approaches are strategies that were all successful, but just were different in the different sites. They used different strategies to get to the same ends. And then areas of opportunities are areas that are still works in progress in some or all of the sites. And these highlight ways to strengthen LDC implementation. So some of the best practices around leadership were involved identifying strong implementation leaders. And by implementation leaders, we mean the people who had the major responsibility for guiding LDC rollout, implementation, and scale-up. Usually these people were from a district central office, or in the case of IU13 or other regional groups, they would be located at that regional group or the ESA. But what these leaders had in common was that they all had expertise in literacy and content and experience in delivering high-quality professional development. They also spent time building relationships with teachers. They were very accessible to teachers and administrators, available for problem solving, for questions and feedback. The implementation leaders also tried to build school leadership capacity by identifying, training, and supporting leaders at the school level. They tried to position the school level leaders as helping to connect what was happening in the classroom with what was happening in the needs at the district level. One example of that was in IU13, they developed a letter of understanding for school level leaders that outlined the roles that school level leaders would take and that the leaders signed as they began their LDC work. In terms of distinct approaches, while all the sites developed teacher leaders, they did it in different ways and with different timelines. But they were all encouraging teachers to take ownership. The primary leadership roles that teachers took on in different sites usually centered around the development of modules and also participating in training and supporting their colleagues. Again, all of the sites created processes around module development, but in different manners. For example, Kenton County immediately started out with a small group of teachers that were spread across content areas and grade levels, and those teachers all developed their own modules. Whereas in Hillsborough, they initially had a more centralized process for module development, which then eventually involved more and more teachers. And then the last distinct approach is leveraging strategic partnerships. And of the three case study sites, IU13 was probably the most proactive in this. They sought out a broad array of partners, which helped them both build capacity and leverage existing resources. And the partners tended to particularly help with training and on online support. And then lastly, the area of opportunity for leadership had to do with promoting strong leadership at both district and school levels and making sure that it developed and was effective at both levels. Because what happened in some sites was that often the district leadership was more involved initially, as that implementation leader was at the district level and was leading the initiative. And as time went on, in many sites, the district leaders realized that they needed to do some things to promote school-level leadership and engagement, and so they developed strategies around that, such as professional development for principals or bringing principals together to talk about LDC. So now I'd like to turn to you and hear a little bit from you, because one of our goals is to learn from each other, as Barb mentioned, and we know there's a lot of wisdom in this virtual room. And so based on your district or school's experience, how does this resonate with you? What are key lessons you've learned about leadership? What are challenges you faced or are facing, and how are you addressing them? So remember to unmute yourself if you're muted.
And why don't we start out with the key lessons?
is Ella from Cacalico.
Hi, Ella.
I would just say one of the key lessons we learned early on was that it was very important that leadership had a clear understanding of what LDC was, so that all of the people in a particular building who were on the leadership team could provide support and guidance and just encouragement for the process. And so that was an important task for me as a district leader, to make sure that they had access to information and could have their questions answered.
That's definitely really important. Mm-hmm.
How about a lesson learned in Ohio? In Kentucky. What are some of the lessons you learned about leadership?
Hi, Barb. This is Kelly Galbraith from IU13. Can you hear me?
We should sure hear you.
I just wanted to chime in and say that I think that at IU13 we learned a lot about supporting administrators through the training. I really think, you know, we, as Rebecca mentioned, established the letter of understanding with our administrators, but having them present during professional development and then providing guidance through regularly scheduled meetings for those principals to problem solve and collaborate, I think was really powerful for them so that they could lead the initiative in their own building.
Other thoughts related to that, folks? In working with principals, I know we do have some principals on here from Georgia and from other places. What are you learning about building level leadership?
Barbara, I think Twinette from Georgia.
Great. We'll hear from Twinette and then
Can you hear me?
next. Awesome. Go ahead.
Great. I'm not a principal, but I am a teacher leader, and I currently co-chair with another teacher, and we are currently trying to become a STEM school, and LDC and MDC are a part of that, and so we're still at the beginning stages, and so this webinar is very informative for us, and I'm just here trying to glean some information from everybody.
That sounds great. No pressure, everybody that has been in this for a couple of years. Lynette is counting on you. Go ahead.
And I just wanted to follow up with what you all were saying about the leadership, and that is one of the lessons learned as well, in how valuable and how important it has been engage principals in that work, and principals, you know, especially, just because, for one, if they don't have a good understanding of LDC and the work, and that teachers are trying to learn and grow, and then sometimes they're not supportive of the work, and then so sometimes it'll fall by the wayside. So that's another reason for them to be supported. And we found, like, where the principal was strong and had a good understanding, then it was more successful in that school, and the capacity started to build as the principal would even be engaged in bringing more people on board.
And also, from Kentucky. I think one of the things that we've seen, like Carol mentioned with the principal leadership, really getting some key teacher leaders that are actually in the classroom using LDC, and then they're having success, and then coaching and training other teachers in their department has really been a key issue for us too. That's really been a lesson that we've learned. That's for success.
Hi, I'm Michael Prisbluck from Orlando. As a teacher of LDC, I have to agree with everything that I've heard so far about the principal's involvement being important and having teacher leaders. When I was in the classroom of LDC, what also helped more than just training is for other teachers to actually come in and see LDC in action, view it going on, watching the students' engagement, and taking it to that more rigorous level and seeing the learning happening on hand. Because it's one thing to talk about it and to even show the data, but to actually see it and view it is a really important component.
This is Pam with
Hi.
SREB. One of the, going off of what Michael said, one of the other things that I found in my school is that when we started to collaborate across content areas and had that time to have discussion about planning and rubrics, we found that we were able to get LDC to work a lot better in our school, and it was more consistent across all grade levels in our middle school. And having our principal be a part of that and sit in made everybody who was not just necessarily on board with LDC but coming into it with an attitude kind of helped soothe that attitude and give them some motivation to kind of continue on the process. And the principal had to understand the struggle that teachers were going through, because it is a little bit of a shift for them. And so having that support and understanding as a principal, trying to sit in a meeting and try to create a module at an LDC training also gives them support as well.
Gives them big credibility, doesn't it, as well?
Yes.
Inside principals co-teach. And an underlying thing that I'm hearing as you folks are talking is teachers want to know that the person who is their leader and in charge of their evaluation in this more high-stakes environment, that they understand what the teacher is trying to do, that they can, teachers want to know if they're taking a risk, that they're going to be supported in that risk-taking environment. And Ella started us off by really talking about the importance of making sure that those principals felt supported from a central office perspective as well. Tools like providing calendars and checklists, providing protocols so that principals or teachers have some structure for conversations, and that they're not doing that, trying to come up with everything all by themselves, are also great tips. As Pam talked about the importance of rubrics and that common time and kind of aligning vertically, I think that really takes us into Rebecca's next leadership point around RFAs, which is alignment. I'm going to turn it back to her.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. It's really great to hear all of your contributions and the important things that you're underlining about this leadership work in support of LDC. And I will add that there is in the full cross case study, there's more detail than I can provide. So if there are certain areas you might like to hear more about, you could look there. I believe there's also contact information for me and for people in each of the sites. If you wanted to follow up with them, have all said they would be willing to be available for that. Okay, so the next condition is alignment. And by alignment, we're talking about LDC's alignment in multiple ways as being very crucial to kind of the success and rooting of LDC in your district, schools, and classroom. We're talking about alignment with the Core Common State Standards or your standards, with curricula, with state and local assessments, and with teacher effectiveness systems. Because if teachers perceive that LDC is in conflict with any of these things, it's going to really undermine their ability to implement and use LDC. So some common best practices here. The first has to do with communicating alignment between LDC and the state academic standards. It's just being really important. And so in the case study sites, implementation leaders sought to convey LDC alignment to the standards in a variety of ways, such as professional things with administrators, but also through webinars and documents. And one of the themes that came up in our discussion just a short time ago is the importance of communicating this to teachers, but also communicating it to the building level administrators so that they feel well versed in this and understand how it fits in. For example, in Kenton County, implementation leaders conducted monthly training sessions for principals and other school leaders in which they explained how LDC was linked to the Core Common State Standards. In IU13, leaders created a document they called Connecting the Dots that outlined the links between LDC and the standards, as well as LDC's links to a number of the other kinds of alignment that we're talking about here. And that document was shared with all kinds of people within the district. So another area has to do with showing or communicating about alignment between LDC and district curricula. As you know, LDC is designed to supplement, not replace existing curricula. And so teachers need to understand how it fits in with their existing curricula and goals. So sites did this with two main strategies. One was by integrating LDC tools into existing curricula, such as teachers design modules to fit in specific places or contribute to certain areas of it. And another way of integrating was sometimes districts would bring teachers together by content area and grade, and those teachers together would look at what modules they had, what they might need, and where those exactly could fit in the curriculum. The second way of creating alignment was using LDC as a factor when selecting new curricula. So a district might be selecting a new middle school or 7th grade English curricula, and they would think about which one could they best use, could LDC best contribute to or fit with. Hillsborough took this kind of a step further by creating some courses that were actually all module courses. They were new courses for the district, and they were completely LDC modules, so of course that was completely aligned with LDC. In terms of distinct approaches, there was the issue of how sites went about with aligning LDC to the teacher evaluation tools in place in the state or the district. And states and districts, these three here, had very different contexts or in very different phases of thinking about and working with teacher effectiveness standards. But a common thread to how they approached this was that they tried to show the links between LDC and the standards. Again, they did this in multiple ways, both online, in-person meetings, and professional development documents. A common thread was to communicate links between LDC and the Danielson rubric, since that was the basis of many of the teacher effectiveness tools. And so to, for example, use workshops to show teachers how LDC could help them show proficiency so that things don't feel like isolated things, or just LDC is not just one more thing you have to add to everything else you're doing, but in fact it connects and can help you in what you need to do. And as for areas of opportunity around alignment, one was the need for additional support for teachers around curriculum alignment. In our national survey, across sites, 86% of teachers agreed that LDC aligned with their curricula. So there was a high perception that it could work. But there were still a lot of questions, as someone already mentioned, for many teachers, and especially science and social studies teachers often. LDC and the standards can represent a significant shift in instructional approach. And one area of tension was that many teachers, 55% in our survey, said that LDC took too much time away from covering required curriculum topics. And this tension was really rooted in teachers feeling time pressure to cover required topics in preparation for state tests. So teachers need help with pacing, and thinking about how pacing and how to fit LDC in, and also understanding how the in-depth LDC modules, the more in-depth LDC modules, can really fit in and complement with the breadth they feel required to cover in terms of curricula coverage. And then the last area of opportunity is the changing natures of state assessments. States, when we did this study, this was true, and now a year and a half or so later, states are still in the process of transitioning from one set of assessments to another, and teachers have questions about how LDC will fit into what they need to do to prepare students to succeed on state assessments. So again, we would love to get the benefit of your wisdom, and I'll kind of have people share their own experiences, key lessons, and or challenges.
Had some really great comments in the chat so far. Would someone like to pull a couple of those out and comment on them, or add a new thought to the conversation? Mike, we're not hearing you. It looks like you're talking, but not hearing you. Let's dive in here and think a little bit about this piece with alignment. One of the last things Rebecca talked about was helping teachers cope with the time pressure.
I'm sorry, what was that last? I missed that last part. Somebody beeped in or out or something.
I just said one of the last questions we heard was talking about the time pressure. We're getting a lot of feedback right now. I'm going to unmute people. If you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself. But we really do want to get conversation and have people be able to speak.
The last 2 points that you covered, when I was in Chattanooga at a school recently, one of the things that I found is if teachers laid out like their quarter and tried to figure out how they were going to flow through that quarter in their standards, and then find a place where they could do an LDC module that would encompass multiple standards. It's not taking away from all the standards that they have to cover. It's really building on that, kind of making it more of an extension, something bigger and more critical thinking that would encompass multiple standards, especially in science and social studies, and that might be something that teachers would need some assistance with. But I did find that the teachers that I was working with, once they sat down and laid out all their content standards that they were covering in that quarter, and then choosing where the LDC module goes, they had much more peace about covering all that content that they needed to cover, especially if you're in a state where they have all the micro details that you have to cover. And a lot of them, like 186 standards, is a lot to cover in a short amount of time. There was another point, which I forgot now. It's been a long day. Sorry. Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Thanks, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
Don Kirkwood from SREB. What I found was that long as we remain content centered, that when we do any part of the module, even the writing part, that it's constantly focusing on the standards. So once you let teachers understand that it's always centered around their content, then they're not worrying about having to do additional instruction within the classroom.
It's Pam again, I remembered. The state assessments, our county, I live in the state of Maryland, and I just left teaching to work for SREB. And in our state, the tests that we do are very content specific, but we are using the LDC module and the PARC assessment as our building ground for instruction. So we're doing all that critical thinking, and you would think that our test scores would be lower, especially in English language arts and math, but really they were much higher because of the critical thinking aspect. It wasn't so much of those details. As long as they're not doing, you have to know a specific date or who did something specific, they're going to be able to score higher on their tests. And what was amazing is that our tests were multiple choice and writing, and as teachers would walk through and skim through student books, we saw the writing had improved, but their score for writing had nothing to do with how well they wrote. It was just whether or not they could answer the question. which is, I think, impressive, considering the test was totally off what our content was at this point.
I feel like we should be clapping, Pam. Anybody else having similar results? I mean, really, that's just something to celebrate. And we love hearing those success stories. I've been hearing people talking about their value-added scores are off the charts as well. A lot of anecdotal evidence, and we're very excited with the I3 grant to begin to, in a systematic way, over the next couple of years, collect large amounts of student achievement data. Your story is so exciting. Other folks seeing some of those kinds of results, able to work on alignment before we move on. I know there's some here that have worked with student learning objectives to help teachers see that.
Hi, Barb. This is Kelly from Ohio. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay. I was having trouble earlier trying to chime in. So what we've done this year is we've been working with small cohorts of teachers from various schools. It started out with a conversation where we divide up into groups: science, middle school level, high school level, social studies, same thing, and really have teachers begin by focusing on what types of reading and writing professionals in their field do on a regular basis, and then looking at what types of reading and writing they themselves have their students do in their classrooms on a throughout the year. And then from there, doing an introduction to LDC and having them look at their next few units of studies and trying to figure out what content standards they want their kids to address and what they would expect them to be able to read and write about, and then to identify their literacy standards they want to focus on, both a reading and a writing, and from there really figuring out what type of teaching tasks to create and which type of mini tasks to create to support that learning, starting small and then growing as they look at student work.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much. And you know, that really leads very nicely. Each of you tonight has kind of segued into to the next topic. We're really thinking about and how that plays out in professional development. And we've heard a lot about that as you folks have talked, the interconnections between leadership and alignment, and then how that plays out as you look at professional learning opportunities. Rebecca's going to take just a couple minutes to share some of the findings around that, and that'll be our last topic before we close for the evening.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this pretty quickly so that we can have some time to hear from you again. So professional learning opportunities is the last one. And by professional learning opportunities, we mean opportunities that are intensive and ongoing, not just a one-shot workshop, and that are rooted in important collaborative opportunities as well. So common best practices included pursuing collaborative approaches. The leaders in all three case study sites actively encouraged this form of professional development because they believed collaboration would enhance the quality and rigor of implementation. The most common types of collaboration were working together to develop or revise modules, observing experienced colleagues implementing modules in their classrooms, and focusing on student work. And I'm going to share one piece of survey data that we found that teachers who reported that they had opportunities to collaborate and spent time collaborating were also more likely to report positively about how LDC was affecting their teaching and student learning. So collaboration was highly correlated with positive reports of other outcomes. Distinct approaches included engaging instructional support teachers with LDC. In Hillsborough, this meant reading coaches. There were reading coaches in every school in Hillsborough, and a leader referred to those coaches as the connective tissue of the initiative. They worked in every phase, coming into classrooms, helping with module development, etc. In other sites, the instructional resource teachers meant librarians, special education teachers, ELL teachers, and instructional coaches who worked in various ways with LDC teachers. And the last area of professional learning that was also pursued in each site was using student work. Sometimes as a tool for reflective practices, sometimes in professional learning communities, sometimes in module revision, in a number of ways. And areas of opportunities, there are a few. One is, as important as collaboration was, or is, many teachers struggle to find the time to collaborate with colleagues. In the survey, only 45% of teachers said that they had common planning time with colleagues. But there were strong examples of collaboration, including principals providing substitutes to cover classes, and collaboration around LDC happening in departmental meetings also. Some sites were experimenting with online learning environments just for their district even, but these, for the most part, weren't yet robust forums. And I wanted to add the note that at the time that we did the case studies, the LDC website that now exists did not exist. So that is an additional a site that's much more present now. And lastly, differentiating LDC tools. Teachers across case study sites requested more training on differentiating LDC instruction and tools. And one particular need was strategies to help the lowest level students meet the increased rigor of LDC. Okay, back to you all. Love to hear about your experiences.
Your turn, folks, to jump in. Key lessons you've learned about PD.
Don Kirkwood. Actually, I was working with a school down in Louisiana and had a very a great opportunity where I was working with the school leaders. They decided that one of their goals for the school was to create common reading practices. So the leadership got together and created a closed read annotation. They created in core tools as a mini task. They added a whole bunch of resources. They had videos, everything. And then the AP actually did the training using the mini tasks and core tools and taking each of the teachers each step through the process of how to do annotation, and then shared it with everyone's library to put it into their modules.
That sounds great. I know we want to keep hearing from people. I'm just going to go to the last slide so that you have the link, but that doesn't mean this is over. We still want to hear about your lessons and challenges.
This is Ella from Pennsylvania. I would just say again that having the opportunity to work collaboratively with key support roles like our librarian, like literacy coaches, has made a tremendous difference. We started at first in one of our buildings that didn't have a lot of support roles as far as resources, and it was very challenging for them to be able to really proceed with it without the support. And as we went forward, we put more in place for that and allowed for some time for our director of reading to push into classrooms and co-teach lessons, and that helped tremendously with the level of confidence of the teachers. One of the other things that we also found was that by scheduling a time for that co-teaching, it helped to keep the classroom teacher on track to move forward with LDC, because it almost served as an accountability measure for actually accomplishing it, rather than saying, I just simply don't have time to get to this, and move on to the lessons that were part of a previous course sequence. So it really served a couple of different purposes, and we found that to be especially helpful.
Getting lots of kudos here in the chat for those comments, Ella. You've been very strategic. Anybody else comments on professional learning, things you're trying before we close for the evening?
Hi, this is Kelly from Ohio again. One of the things that we've been working with our teacher coaches on is really when we have the list of objectives for training, really asking them to take that skill we're asking teachers to build and identify it, as well as kind of the instructional strategies they're using with the participants. So they're modeling essentially what we're then asking the participants and teachers to do with their kids. So they're pointing out exactly what skill they're building with the audience, and some of the instructional strategies that they're using with things like, moving beyond reading an exemplar module to actually beginning to modify your own module to move towards that exemplary stage, and talking about using a transition to writing strategy, and that way they can then also see that being modeled and apply it in their own work.
This is Carol from Kentucky. Just to kind of build on what Kelly was just saying, Kelly Philbeck and I, one of the things that we've tried to do a lot in Kentucky with the teachers is that we're engaging those teachers in modeling the strategy that they can take right back and use in their classrooms, even if they are not ready to actually implement a full model or a module. They're still able to embed and that literacy strategy in their classroom right away. So that was one of our goals in our professional learning and design.
Thanks so much, Carol. I think I'm hearing that more and more as I'm out in schools, that folks are talking about there's multiple ways to get started with LDC. And maybe a few years ago, they just saw this big module and it was scary. But now they're finding they could start with mini tasks. They could start with a teaching task. Kentucky and Colorado's work with common assessments, that they're seeing the flexibility in just getting started. So thank you so much, Carol. Real briefly, we just want to thank you. It's 8:48. We're a few minutes over time. I have to tell you, this is again our first launch, and thank you for helping to launch this well with your practical ideas and comments. I am going to save the chat so that the comments that were shared will be able to be provided. We're going to save the recording and also produce the PDF of the presentation. I would so appreciate your feedback at this link. I will also tweet it out. And I just want to thank all of you for the work that you're out there doing every day. I'm tempted to just talk a little bit with professional learning about how at LDC we're really trying to work on flipping our PD and blending it with online courses, but that's a conversation for another day. But you know where I'm at, and hoping to hear from all of you again real soon. And please keep comments and questions coming for me in terms of anything from the content to the timing. I see Don has a comment about evening, whether 45 minutes, all those kinds of things. We want to hear it. So thank you so much. And Twinette, so nice for saying you'll be back for more. So thank you, everybody. And we're concluding. Stay warm.
Thanks, everybody.